at countries A through Z, not just Americans against America's founders. They have rules replacing what America's founders had declassified for themselves, with nature itself communicated to us all at each age. So we had other communicated that was pretended into databases for us by influences from off the campuses we went in such a way to keep hyper additional collusion slash S only capable of being. Also needing to blame on other things, others ourselves, where and how that's forced, right where no one wants it, but right where there are exceptions, right where everyone's just doing their job the way taught. The campuses are collusion slash S again with a whole predicate acts methods, organized crimes methods. I'm not even a lawyer. Wire crime methods, mail crime methods that interbranch and intelligence have at the same time with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. The World Trade Center attack was effectively pulled off to pretend that we wanted rules with torture. This breaching method measures and maintains polling locations like Quinnipiac University, has roles with many people tied to a Kevin Harris, involved with judges and prosecutors, and with Kevin Harris's family is involved with proven child abusers, leaders, and kids. I never had a word of conversation with him in my life. He's increasingly involved with people with intelligence community at Quinnipiac University, Central Connecticut State University, people involved with the Britain Superior Court, medical campuses, child campuses involved with identity theft. Their proofs, the only time I ever saw, he walked out of a door right before me. Their proof they took a picture of that to plant evidences, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. Never had a word of conversation with Kevin Harris. Also, Rick Paglione sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm he's involved with medical corruption. He didn't say the word medical corruption, the phrase. He said with Brian Silver, who's involved with New Britain Superior Court. A whole bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court involved on off Two Rod Highway, where it runs into Hangdog Lane, with complete strangers I never even communicated with, and others that went out of their way to put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, and acting tied to people putting predicate acts in databases, pretending passions and emotions, and then making it look like I ever had a word of conversation with them or saw them and was in locations with them I never were. There's a Casper family increasingly involved with people's confessions tied to them. And I never saw them on a campus in my life when I was in grammar school. One time there was confession. I looked in the room and checked. True. I found out it's about family members like associated with the Connecticut State Judicial Branch offices and people involved with the students and teachers spreading fake things with people from off the campuses. At the same time, with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases, news, people next to all natures of crime scenes, the courts at the same time, the interbranch, the sources, the family members, different natures of conjunctions to them. At the same time, with overt criminal enterprise, private ones, terrorists, put in the same sequence shifts, the same predicate acts roles, wire crime acts methods that are criminally foreign influenced, like those of WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News. There are increasingly collusions interstates and within people international, but also for a further hyper international, so to speak. For example, coming right from and as roles with that breaching method, which had crazy laws against every human difference, northern colonies and southern colonies, all these crazy things, even against our black people's rights of eyes. Before America's founders were born, there were already roles with that. There were already roles with nature's demonstrations of that and what it caused. Blamed on other things, others ourselves. And/or sensing anyone not collusion slash S with that at the same time. So to be and stay incapable of affording discernment of use slash S of that by a hyper foreign name, a hyper foreign breaching method, a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise, the proverbial devil, the proverbial Shaytun. Stay tuned. Please, America, WFSB has people involved with religious spots too, with their roles, like with the state capitol, with people with the campuses and the state corrections offices and the state judicial branch offices, increasingly has collusions at crime scenes and with campuses involved in putting fake things in databases and then acting tied to it. And they've been using changing and faking what's actually recorded with the phones, using phone crime methods, and with the security at the campuses, with the leaders of the campuses, with medical with the campuses, and the difference of their guilt or the medical families next to the campuses. Like there's a whole bunch of people recorded, confess, demonstrate, confirm. One of them is Dr. Laura Saunders is involved with WFSB with some sexual medical offenders of kids, and rolls with courts, family members with that, and first forcing them. Other natures of organized crimes with her neighbors intercities that are also involved with all kinds of the judicial branch office, the corrections offices, all kinds of methods and natures of organized crimes, including with drugs and medicines crimes. And with people with the state capitol supposed to be shown they need to pretend to be against that stuff when they're writing, about laws. They have collusions with all kinds of drugs and medicines crime. They have laws against marijuana. Meanwhile, they're making legal all these synthetic drugs and things like that, right, available for kids, temporarily disables them and everything. Way worse than any marijuana, and that's even stronger than the ones they have at the place. And then they have that. So with weak ones and the disgusting tasting, so the people will use the synthetic ones that are higher. They allow that to be higher. Unsafe or smaller things are worse for you than person. In other words, then all these motives, everyone is screening the breaching methods rules with their motives. Our founders communicated for us to understand how a breaching method was rolls with everyone's motives, narratives, needs, and natures per its method of keeping that. So for everyone to say, well, that's I don't want that. In other words, but that's collusion where people want it. In other words, you guys don't want it, but you have when people try to use, well, how we have black people as whites of eyes for evidence, the way we all have tried. You guys meet a bunch of fake, pretending other. A breaching method keeps the outcome /S. You guys were child abused at each age. At each age and nature of campus is a collusion /S, where our collusions, plural, with the breaching method singular. And it hides behind and through those collusions. And it shows them there were roles with it. Each age and nature of the names of the people of the sciences, the names of the people that counter the sciences when they blame other things other than themselves. Even when correctly, like blaming the sciences when they do it wrong, exactly the way the breaching method wants and needs, leaving its roles out. In other words, we're supposed to address how and why there's a witch trial's place, even if it was completely made up. Why there's a witch trial's place. You look what laws were simultaneous. There were human fact, human nature, torture, extortion, slavery laws, force. Everyone rolls with it. Northern colonies and southern colonies, more than 13, and then America's founders were born. Black pupils. Period. We were taught to see the whites of eyes. I still don't even know who it is who said that. A lot of Americans, probably most Americans, don't even know who said that yet. But we know that. We remember that. That's one of the only things they taught us well. Partially the way, part of the reason that's manifest that way is because the breaching method maintained and effectively maintains use /S of collusion /S, replacing what both our founders and what nature itself communicates, is proper for short words with convictions, little convictions with guilt assignments. This breaching method is and has been forbidding anyone to speak about all the simultaneous collusions with logic and with the nature of logic that are used by the hyper simultaneous. In other words, that which had sickly non-distinctly too. northern colonies, southern colonies, roles of torture, extortion, slavery against themselves and everyone else syntactically, therefore physically to an extent. Otherwise, that body was sentenced, including if that body was a majority of people, including if that body was every one of an entire country together. Any grouping of countries that still entertain could only be, every country can only be operated by locations, areas, and states. As long as their styles, needs, and natures blaming and haven't blamed other things, others, or selves, for things that nature itself and that our founders communicated for us to blame on the breaching method, communicated for us to liberate our free speech to show how discernment of it requires discernment with the collusions with it. That's, for example, one of the reasons we cannot leave out Black people's rights of eyes. We could discern where and how other things, others, or selves are being and haven't been blamed, even if it's not brought up with the logic's nature of logic with American history, with the syntax of the names of the people, the sciences. Well, I'm not a lawyer. And the lawyers, too, and the American history experts. Collusions, self-valued roles, with what our founders communicated to have communicated for themselves replaced. And the roles, needs, natures, and styles insidiously pretending other and believing other. And while tactically delusions wrought and dishonest, everyone was dishonest and is dishonest. And they want to speak about truth anyway. As collusion /S with the worst use /S of the predicate acts with facts, collusion /S from off the campuses, but then hyper additionally. For example, and the difference of there over the acting tied to it. This employed alter roles with the syntax of a change of a factual nature. Glorifying people and attacking people exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs. That which only allowed high predators to be propagated. All exceptions in exception nature as collusion /S. As you have all stayed high predators, replacing what nature communicates with Black pupils, whites of eyes, and about the human fact treatment nature breaching method that was entrenched, and all roles with it. And then Columbus sailed the ocean, bro. Already, Native Americans, they weren't even named Native Americans. Already the tribes had been fighting with tribes. Already the tribes had been separated from that quality of fact treatment nature that requires the campus Marcias function /S with the republic for which we stand, the bridge since some ancient times, incapable of affording to be, let alone to protract short words with convictions proper by the identity the sciences share. While with all exceptions in exception nature that appear that they don't, that they come with exception, they come with demonstration /S of the same thing and about how it is. Demonstrations of how it is exception nature distinctly from, while non-distinctly from all things, even anything anyone makes up. It is inseparable from and as the order of the finite. Relativity to the parts of finite, detail, the order of the finite, distinctly from, but non-distinctly from, the active or grouped parts of that thing, of art, say, and the simultaneous parts. Just like as nature shows us, we can only appreciate subjects individually grouped and simultaneous to an extent. It's simultaneously showing us its further distinct identity of simultaneous nature, greater than, more finite than, and with active relativity to ourselves the way we know, but also further hyper distinctly in ways that no other identity or volume could mimic. Otherwise, we sense. So you guys want to have descriptions and go back and forth with opinions on emotions as systems tactical ulterior from that unabridged. Then you want to pretend you have extra. Well, I'm not expert. What are you speaking on the law for? What are you speaking on the words for? That's why they value on a mass scale. Predicate acts methods like putting fake transcripts in databases. As timed collusion /S with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists. The World Trade Center was effectively pulled off to make pretend Americans believe on that we wanted torture. Polling locations, in other words, and they're while they're constantly misinforming people, lying about their motivations in records, behind the background, fake records. In other words, we only have to have black people's whites of eyes. And in other words, if you guys knew what is known, but the experts are using their knowledge of good and evil over American history to play games, or you don't know, in other words, who such and such was in 1940 something. In other words, they don't even know American. James Madison's the only founder we know the name of. And there were a whole bunch of founders that needed to be there for James Madison and for them plural. And George Washington, he didn't have means to counter those internationally entrenched conversations. Collusion /S forced roles themselves tortured, extorted, enslaved. Everyone was forced to ask questions and study. In other words, were they an extent of collusion against themselves and against everyone else? In fact, cheap nature-wise, pretending to be free speech while knowingly not, to an extent. Otherwise, that body was sentenced, including if they were a majority of people, including if they were everyone. That's what do you think was behind those crazy laws? Why do you think really there are other motivations they're using, but the breaching method involves your motivations when you replace its roles. The breaching method. One of the things true always that all the crazy different uses of the difference of Native than of Native American. The difference of black people's whites of eyes, male, female. They're doing that sickly distinctly over the last decade or so. Because this breaching method has the roles sickly non-distinctly with all human differences. And we would have adapted because it's against it's multi-front, a scam game. Identity theft, fraud, slander method. It knows our kids. It knows the kids. I don't have any kids. It takes our kids. In other words, it takes kids, makes them apart from their families. They're putting fake things, having the difference of the adults' roles or kids' roles. A breaching method keeps that outcome. It keeps the countries individually grouped or together, and together needing to self-value relative roles with such. Criminally foreign influence, tactically collusions, with all natures of hierarchy, with all natures of expert lean. See, all must glean. Like sings, but makes no sound but shush. Where it prefers the shush. Like sings, like those things,